We're now going to go into more detail about the 5 different kingdoms, and in particular, the cells in the 5 different kingdoms. So the first thing to go over is, how do we actually define a cell? It's a little bit complicated, but the easiest way to think of it is the cell is the basic unit of life. Or think of a unit as a building block, like blocks of Lego. So every living thing, its body is made up of one or more cells. All of the cells stack together like blocks to make up the body. So all living things are made of cells, at least one cell. And we know this because if you look at some tissue of a living thing, part of its body, under a microscope, we can actually see the cells. So here are some leaf cells from a plant, and we can see each individual cell in these hexagon shapes. The second one here is a picture of some skin cells from a human. And there are a few different types of cells here, but they're all still a human body cell. But now let's look at the types of cells in each of the 5 different kingdoms, because we've learnt previously about the differences in each kingdom. Particularly, we talked about whether they're made up of one cell or many cells, and also where they get their energy from. But looking at the type of cells in each kingdom is a more scientific way of classifying. So we'll start with animals, or kingdom Animalia. And animals, as we've learnt before, get their energy by eating other things, and they're made of many cells, or they're multicellular. If we look at the cells, though, of animals, they all have this dark region in the middle, which is called the nucleus. And it's like the brain of the cell. It controls all of the functions of the cell. And around the outside of animal cells, they have this thin layer called the cell membrane. It's like a thin plastic bag that holds all of the cell together. But in animals, it's not particularly hard, and the cell can move around. If you feel your skin and your muscles, you can feel that they're squishy and the cells can move. But plants, on the other hand, if we look at their cells, they still have a nucleus. It's a dark region there. And they still have a cell membrane that holds the cell together. But they also have a thick layer around the outside of the cell called a cell wall. And this keeps the cells strong and rigid, and that's why plants can hold themselves up. They don't need bones to stand upright, which animals do. If we look at the fungi kingdom now, fungi cells, they also have a nucleus, and they have a membrane, cell membrane, and just like plants, they have a cell wall too. But the cell wall in fungi is actually made of a different material in plant than compared to plants. Now looking at the protists, their cells have a nucleus too, but they don't have a cell wall. They have a cell membrane, just like animals. the Monera, or the bacteria, they have the most different cells to the other kingdoms. As we've learnt, they're the simplest and the smallest cells of living things, and they're so simple that they don't have a nucleus. All the DNA is just floating around in the middle of the cell. But bacteria do have a cell wall to protect the cell. So we can see each of the 5 kingdoms has particular kinds of cells, and that helps us to classify these organisms into the 5 different kingdoms.